Jimmy Devon Boyd was an American singer, musician, and actor known for his recording of the song, "I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus." Early years. Boyd was born in Mississippi to Leslie and Winnie Boyd. His father was a farmer and picked cotton to help support the family. When Jimmy Boyd was 2 years old, Leslie Boyd put Winnie, Jimmy, and one of Boyd's brothers on a train to Riverside, California. Not having enough money to buy tickets for himself, Leslie Boyd would stow away on freight trains west to rejoin his family. Boyd's grandfather, William Boyd, who had 21 children, played at dances and family gatherings in Mississippi. Leslie Boyd played guitar and harmonica and started teaching Jimmy to play guitar when he was 9 years old. Leslie Boyd had been a farmer when a drought hit. As there was no cotton in California to pick, finding work was difficult. He eventually got work cleaning up construction sites, and ended up becoming a carpenter. Leslie and Winnie Boyd would take their children to country and western dances held in a barn in Colton, California outside of Riverside. It was at one of these dances when Boyd's older, 9-year-old brother, Kenneth, went up to the bandstand and told the band leader, Texas Jim Lewis, he should hear his little brother sing and play the guitar. Lewis called 7-year-old Jimmy on stage to sing and play. After the dance concluded, Lewis and the manager of a local radio station approached Boyd's parents to make an offer of $50 per appearance on an hour-long radio show to be broadcast from the dance every Saturday night. While the family was in Los Angeles for Leslie Boyd's cataract surgery, they were told about auditions being held for the Al Jarvis talent show on KLAC-TV. Following his audition, Boyd appeared on Jarvis' show the same night. Winning the contest, Boyd was the subject of numerous telegrams and telephone calls from fans addressed to Jarvis and KLAC. Jarvis, along with co-host Betty White, had a 5-hour-a-day, 6-day-a-week talk show on KLAC-TV called Hollywood on Television. After his popular appearance and win on the talent show, Jarvis signed Boyd to appear regularly on Hollywood on Television. With his popularity rising, Boyd started to be seen on other television shows, including CBS TV's The Frank Sinatra Show. I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus. Boyd recorded the song, I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus, for Columbia Records in 1952, when he was 13 years old. It became a hit, selling over 2.5 million records in its first week's release, and Boyd's name became known internationally. Boyd was presented with 2 gold records. Boyd's record went to number 1 on the charts again the following year at Christmas, and continues to sell as a Christmas song. Collective disc sales by 1966 amounted to over 11 million copies. Boyd owned horses, so Columbia presented him with a silver-mounted saddle. Inscribed in the silver plate on the back of the saddle were the words, "Presented by Columbia Records to Jimmy Boyd," commemorating his 3 million record of I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus. When first released, the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Boston condemned the song for implying even a tenuous link between sex and the religious holiday, and radio stations in several markets banned it. Boyd made worldwide news when he went to Boston to explain that, of course, Santa Claus and Daddy were the same man. The following Christmas the ban was lifted. Between February 1953 and November 1954, Boyd made 5 appearances on The Ed Sullivan Show. In one appearance, he replaced the scheduled popular singer of the time, Giselle McKenzie. Boyd was in New York on his way to Montreal for a concert. After the show, Boyd was informed that McKenzie had been bumped. He was so upset at the turn of events that he personally asked Sullivan to rebook McKenzie. Over the years, Boyd would make appearances on, among other shows, Kraft Music Hall, The Doris Day Show, The Bing Crosby Show, The Bob Hope Show, The Patti Page Show, The Merv Griffin Show, The Tonight Show, Shindig, and American Bandstand. Boyd recorded several more hit records, teaming up at age 14, with Frankie Laine in 1953 on Tell Me a Story, which reached number 4, and The Little Boy and the Old Man, and with Rosemary Clooney that summer on Dennis the Menace, which reached number 25. Relationship with Mitch Miller. Boyd said that although he liked the songs that became hits for him, especially the duets with, among others, Laine, Clooney, and Gayla Peavy, he never wanted to sing many of the novelty songs that Mitch Miller, the head of artists and repertoire of Columbia Records, gave him. As the head of A&R at Columbia, Mitch Miller was in charge of all the recording artists there, including Frank Sinatra. When Mitch Miller signed him to Columbia, Boyd's new roots were in country music. Boyd's first hit at Columbia under Miller, God's Little Candles, was in the country field. At the time, 250,000 records was the mark of a country hit, but God's Little Candles nearly reached the million mark. Years later, Chris Christopherson introduced himself to Boyd and told him he had borrowed the music from the bridge of God's Little Candles to write one of his songs. Boyd was a fan of Christopherson and was so overwhelmed that when he had introduced himself, he forgot to ask Christopherson which song he used it in. Despite this success, Miller moved Boyd into the pop music genre since country music was an isolated field at the time and very small in the overall record-buying fanbase. Rock and roll was starting to change the industry, and Boyd wanted to sing rock music. Miller passionately hated rock and roll and publicly stated it was a passing fad. He forbade anyone with Columbia Records to record rock music. Although Boyd says he loved Miller like a father, he felt his era was passing. Boyd was later to be proven right. After a number of novelty songs that Boyd did not like and that did not reach the top 10, Miller called Boyd and told him that he had a new song and would be arriving in Los Angeles to play it for him. Miller set up a meeting at the Beverly Hills Hotel with Percy Faith. The hotel provided a room with a piano for Faith to play the song, and Miller gave Boyd the lyrics to read. After reading the first lines of the song, Boyd, without hearing the music, told Miller he did not want to sing these kind of novelty songs anymore, and turned it down. Miller and Faith recorded the song with another Columbia artist named Joe Stafford. The opening lines were, "Goodbye Joe, me gotta go, me oh my oh. Me gotta go pole the pirogue down the bayou." The song, "Jambalaya," went to number 3 on the Billboard charts. Ironically, the novelty song that Boyd declined to record had been written by country music legend Hank Williams. Frank Sinatra declared that Miller's choices of songs had ruined his career, and he promptly switched over to Capitol Records, where he chose his own songs and began making hit records again. However, Boyd felt a great deal of loyalty to Miller. He did not follow through with his own wish to go to Memphis and record with Sam Phillips at his Sun Records, where the dawn of rock and roll was beginning with many of the new rock artists of the time. Instead, he concentrated more on movies and television, and finishing his education. In retrospect, Boyd said he wished that he had gone to Sun Records. Other recordings: in 1966, Boyd had a number 3 hit in Brisbane, Australia with "I Would Never Do That," produced by Leon Russell and Snuff Garrett and engineered by J.J. Cale for Imperial Records. The flip side, "Will I Cry," was co-written, engineered, had backup vocals and guitar instrumentals by J.J. Cale. Another favorite recording session of Boyd's was a song written by Barry Gibb of the Bee Gees, "That's What I'll Give to You." Terry Melcher produced the session for Boyd on VJ Records. VJ was the first company to release all the early Beatles records in the United States. Before Boyd's single was released, VJ was sued by Capitol and lost all the royalties and rights to the Beatles. The company went bankrupt. The song was eventually released on Rhino Records. Herb Alpert had visited the session at VJ and liked it so much he asked Boyd and Melcher to record for A&M Records. While recording the album, the Manson murders occurred at a house in which Melcher had previously lived, prompting Melcher to abandon the project and go into seclusion. The album was never finished. Bobby Darin wrote and produced a record, "Made in the Shade," for Boyd. Although they had met briefly at different events, Boyd and Darin became friends while working on different movies at Universal Studios. Unfortunately, Boyd stated, "It was released at the same time as Phil Spector's first amazing Wall of Sound recordings. Our record was more like a mound of sound and was lost somewhere behind the wall. Bobby was one of the most talented people I've ever known," says Boyd. Had he lived, he would have sustained the same kind of legendary career that Sinatra had. He could do it all. He could write and sing rock and roll, folk, jazz, or croon with Sinatra. And in each genre be as good or better than the best in each field. And if that wasn't enough, he was very witty and funny. If I didn't like him so much, I could have hated him for being so talented. Work in film, television and Las Vegas. Boyd showed he had comedic talents in recurring roles in the television series Bachelor Father, Date with the Angels, The Betty White Show, Broadside, and My Three Sons. He also appeared in a number of motion pictures, including Inherit the Wind. In that film, Boyd portrays Howard, a student who is called as the first witness in the trial of teacher Bertram Cates. One of his surviving performances available online is with Betty White on The Betty White Show in the mid-1950s. At the time, Boyd was the youngest entertainer ever allowed to appear in Las Vegas, starring at the famed Sands Hotel's Copa Room at age 13 during Sinatra's Rat Pack era. On Boyd's opening night show, he was applauded back on stage by the audience for multiple encores. With the audience still cheering and whistling, Sands boss, Jack Intrata, standing backstage, caught Boyd and stopped him from going back on stage after his third encore. Intrata asked Boyd if he could please go back for only one encore during his performances, and explained that it was nearly 2 o'clock in the morning and that the hotel needed the people to go back to the casino and gamble. Boyd also appeared at the Golden Hotel in Reno, Nevada. Boyd, along with his music, did stand-up comedy. He played the theater circuit for several years that was popular at that time, including the Capitol, Paramount, and Seville theaters in New York City, Chicago, Hartford, Montreal, and Toronto. Following entertainers such as Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, Peggy Lee, Frankie Lane, Johnny Ray and Eddie Fisher with his own show, he performed at 90,000-seat-plus venues such as Soldier Field, the Rubber Bowl, the Plantation, Red Rocks and others, in Chicago, Ohio, Colorado, Hawaii and Canada, along with hundreds of one-nighters on the road throughout the US, Canada, and England. A seasoned performer at 14, he took time off to return to Hollywood to star in a horse racing movie called Racing Blood for 20th Century Fox. Boyd found Hollywood to be far less grueling than life on the road. At 16 years of age he returned to Hollywood again to appear in The Second Greatest Sex with Gene Crane, George Nader, and Burt Lahr for Universal Pictures. Then it was on to New York to do a musical version of Tom Sawyer for the United States Steel Hour on CBS, with Florence Henderson as Becky. The next year he was asked back to do the title role in the United States Steel Hours musical version of Huckleberry Finn, co-starring with Basil Rathbone and Jack Carson as the Carpetbaggers. Not wanting to go on the road again, and enjoying doing TV and movies, Boyd hung up his guitar at least temporarily and started having fun as a regular on comedy shows like Date with the Angels, Bachelor Father with John Forsythe, and Broadside. He starred with Mickey Rooney, Terry Moore, Dan Duryea and Yvette Mimieux in the film Platinum High School for MGM. Boyd was shooting Bachelor Father with Forsythe and simultaneously filming Inherit the Wind with Spencer Tracy, Gene Kelly and Frederick March for Universal Studios. Boyd co-starred in the National Touring Company of Neil Simon's play The Star-Spangled Girl with George Hamilton and Deanna Martin. Neil Simon's brother Danny Simon stated, "Initially Jimmy didn't want to do The Star-Spangled Girl. It meant he would have to leave LA for a year, and he wasn't sure he wanted to do the same show night after night. Neil and I took him out to dinner and coerced him into it. Jimmy got rave reviews, and was glad he did the play." Personal life. In 1960, Boyd married actress Yvonne Craig. After a year of marriage, Boyd was drafted into the Army and was stationed in Texas. Separation proved unfortunate to his marriage, which ended in divorce in 1962. Boyd went to the Republic of Vietnam in 1965 with his own show for the USO. In February 1967 he also joined in Nancy Sinatra's USO trip to entertain American troops in South Vietnam. Boyd married a second time in 1980. He and Ann Forrie Boyd had a son together, but divorced in 1984. He remained single for the rest of his life. When asked, "What's the most exciting thing that ever happened to you?" his reply was, "The birth of my son." Jimmy Boyd died of cancer in 2009 at the age of 70. Awards for his contributions to the recording industry. Boyd was awarded a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 1959. It made Boyd the youngest ever recipient of the honor for 45 years, until actress twins Mary-Kate Olsen and Ashley Olsen were jointly awarded a star in 2004.